The first thing that entered the room with me was my father's voice, the echo I'd tried to shed in the elevator. "You'll get nothing from your grandfather's will, Emily. Nothing." It clung to the polished brass and the marble floors, to the hush of power that made you instinctively lower your breath. I felt it in the weight of the pearl bracelet on my wrist, cool and loyal, a small moon against my pulse. I told myself to keep walking. I told myself to stop believing him. And yet the certainty in his cruelty had always known where to land, on the softest part of me. Growing up in the Carter house felt like learning to survive in a museum where only one portrait mattered, Jason's. At dinner, Dad would tilt his glass toward my brother and say, "Jason is the future of this family," with a pride that felt rehearsed, like a speech he'd been practicing since before either of us knew our own names. And then he'd let his gaze slide to me, the temperature dropping a degree as he added, with a dry smile that cut, "And you, Emily, should focus on finding a husband rich enough to tolerate you." My mother's eyes would flicker up and away like skittish birds, sorry without teeth, love without a voice. I learned to hold my breath, to keep my chin level, to cry in rooms with locked doors and the fan on. But my grandfather didn't speak the language of dismissal. William Carter had a way of sitting beside you like the world had time, like the streetlights would wait. He would tap my chin and say, "You're my fighter, Emily." And the words would set like gold in places Dad's words only bruised. He would sneak me out for ice cream and leave a smear of vanilla on the steering wheel of his old Cadillac. And for a girl who never saw herself reflected in the glass cases at home, that car hood under the summer sky felt like a church. When he pressed this bracelet into my palm, small pearls, not flashy, not loud, he said, "Wear it when you forget who you are." I wore it the day we buried him. I wore it when Dad leaned to my ear beside the casket and hissed, "Don't expect a penny, Emily." And the roses smelled like metal. Grief rearranged the house, but not the hierarchy. The calls from cousins grew sugar sweet, and the condolences from aunts came ribboned with questions they pretended were accidental. "You'll be at the reading, won't you?" The law firm loomed like a cathedral of glass when I arrived. High ceilings, rugs that quieted footsteps, a conference room where the air felt thick with other people's expectations. Jason lounged against the wall in a suit that looked poured on, eyes bright with the kind of certainty that requires no evidence. "You actually showed up," he murmured as I passed, and the corner of his mouth curled the way it had since we were children, and he could smell fear. "Of course," I said, and though the words steadied in my mouth, my heartbeat stumbled. Dad sat at the head of the mahogany table like a man auditioning for a throne. He didn't stand. He didn't have to. His attention slid over me like I was a conference room chair someone had dragged from the hallway. "I almost told them not to expect you," he said, every syllable dipped in condescension that glinted like a cufflink. And in the pause that followed, the room arranged itself into spectators. I took my seat and held the bracelet as if the pearls had a pulse. The door opened and a new temperature entered with attorney Daniel Foster. Tall, composed, silver rims, framing eyes that had seen families turn into battlefields and fortunes turn to ash. He set a thick folder on the table and thanked us for coming. Conversations clipped off. The hush sharpened. He opened the file and glanced around with the politeness of a surgeon before the first incision. Then his gaze found mine and he smiled, small, deliberate, like a hand on my shoulder. In that slight curve of his mouth, I felt something tilt, the tiniest shift in gravity, and my father's smirk, so often welded into place, faltered like a stage light blinking. The clock in the corner ticked once, loud as a gavel. My fingers tightened on the bracelet, and for the first time since the elevator doors had opened, I let myself believe that something might not go the way my father had promised. The lawyer's voice carried the weight of inevitability. To my beloved grandson, Jason Carter, he began, his tone steady and formal. I leave the Carter penthouse on Fifth Avenue with all furnishings included and a cash inheritance of $20 million. The air shifted. Gasps, murmurs, the low hum of satisfaction from the corner where Jason sat. He smiled the way men do when they think the story has ended, slow and practiced, a smile designed for magazine covers and victory photos. His eyes met mine, gleaming with mockery as his lips shaped silent words. Told you so. I wanted to look away, but I didn't. I kept my expression still, my pulse a drum beneath the pearls around my wrist. The room smelled faintly of coffee and perfume and greed, and I felt the edges of it closing in. Then Daniel turned the page. The sound, a single crisp slide of paper, cut through the room like a blade. He lifted his gaze again, and when his eyes met mine, he smiled. Softer this time, almost like he was bracing me. To my granddaughter, Emily Carter, he continued, I leave controlling interest in Carter Global Enterprises, along with all subsidiary companies, real estate holdings, and assets valued at approximately $5 billion. For a moment, no one moved. The words hung there, impossibly heavy, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. Then chaos. Voices collided, shouts, gasps, the scrape of chairs. Jason shot to his feet, eyes wide, disbelief twisting into rage. "What? That's impossible!" he spat, his voice cracking like glass. My father slammed his palms against the table so hard that the crystal water glasses trembled. "This is outrageous!" he bellowed. "There must be some mistake." Daniel didn't flinch. "There is no mistake, Mr. Carter. These were William Carter's explicit instructions." Jason's hand curled into a fist. "She's not capable," he shouted. "She'll destroy everything. Grandpa must have been manipulated." I could feel every pair of eyes turning toward me, sharp, assessing, waiting for me to crumble. For years, I had been the quiet one, the shadow. But now, the silence pressed against me differently, not as suffocation, but as a stage. My hands trembled under the table, but I forced them still. I raised my head, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my teeth. "Funny," I said, my voice low but clear. "Grandpa didn't think so." The room seemed to ripple. A few relatives looked startled. Others leaned forward as if catching a scent of something new. Defiance. My father's glare could have split stone. "You manipulated him," he hissed. "You must have gotten to him when he was weak." His voice shook with fury, the kind that came from disbelief that his control could slip even an inch. Daniel adjusted his glasses calmly. "Mr. Carter was of sound mind," he said. "He underwent a full psychiatric evaluation prior to signing. These are valid, binding wishes." The veins on my father's temple throbbed. Jason's jaw clenched, eyes darting between me and the lawyer, like a trapped animal searching for escape. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about power, control, everything they believed they were entitled to by virtue of being men, by virtue of being loud. My grandfather had taken it all from them with a single stroke of a pen and handed it to the one person they'd spent their lives trying to silence. I looked down at the bracelet again, the pearls gleaming under the chandelier. "You're my fighter," Grandpa had said. I could almost hear him in the rustle of papers and the echoes of disbelief. I lifted my chin. "Maybe Grandpa saw something in me you never cared to look for," I said quietly. My father opened his mouth, fury brimming, but the words didn't come. Jason's face twisted with hatred, and in that moment, I realized something I'd never seen before. Their fear. They weren't angry because I had been chosen. They were angry because for the first time, they had lost control of the story. My father's voice cracked the air like thunder. "Emily will destroy everything," he roared, his knuckles white against the polished wood. She has no business sense, no experience, no leadership. Carter Global will collapse within months. Jason joined in, his words dripping venom. He's right. You don't belong in that boardroom, Emily. You don't even know how it works. You'll ruin everything Grandpa built. Their anger rolled over me like a wave, but beneath it, something steadier was rising. For years, I'd let their words define me. Quiet, unworthy, invisible. But now, with every insult they hurled, I felt the weight of Grandpa's faith pressing against my skin, grounding me. I stood, my chair legs scraping softly against the floor, and said, "You mean I'll destroy your plans?" The room froze. My father's eyes flicked to mine, startled by the sound of resistance. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I went on. Grandpa saw through you. He chose me because he trusted me, not you, not Jason. Gasps rippled through the room. Aunts covered their mouths. Cousins whispered like wind across glass. Jason let out a bitter laugh. Trust? Don't make me laugh. I worked in that company for years. I earned it. I clenched my fists. No, Jason, you used it. You treated Grandpa like an asset. I was there when he got sick, when no one else bothered to visit. I didn't talk about profits or deals. I listened. I cared. That's what he saw. My father's face flushed crimson, veins standing out like cords. He leaned forward, his breath sharp with fury. "You are an embarrassment," he hissed. "Jason and I built this family name. You were supposed to stay quiet, marry well, and stay out of our way." The words burned, they always did, but something in me had hardened. I met his glare, my voice low and clear. "No, Dad. Grandpa built this name, and now I carry it. You can hate me all you want, but this legacy is mine." Jason's lips curled into a snarl. "You don't even know what legacy means." I took a step closer. "It means more than greed, more than power. It means responsibility. Something neither of you ever understood." The silence that followed was electric. For the first time, my father looked unsure, his fury meeting something he hadn't prepared for, my conviction. Daniel, calm as ever, raised a hand. "Mr. Carter anticipated this tension," he said. From the folder, he withdrew a sealed envelope, thick cream paper sealed with red wax. The sight of it drew a collective breath from the room. "This," Daniel said, holding it up, "is a personal letter addressed to Emily Carter." Whispers ignited again, soft and sharp. Jason scoffed. Of course, another one of his sentimental tricks. He always had a soft spot for her. "Soft spot?" I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "He loved me." My father slammed a hand on the table. "We don't need to hear this nonsense. Whatever's in that letter doesn't change reality." "Yes, it does," I said, my voice trembling with fury and something deeper, grief. "Read it, Mr. Foster, please." Daniel broke the seal with careful precision, unfolding the letter. His voice softened, but it carried through the room like a prayer. "My dearest Emily, the world underestimated you, but I never did. You were the one who sat with me when I was tired. You listened when everyone else demanded. I entrust you with this empire, not as a burden, but as recognition of your strength and your heart." My throat tightened. The words blurred behind tears I didn't want to shed in front of them. Jason snorted. "Strength? She doesn't even know how to balance a budget." Daniel continued, unwavering. "Jason was raised in privilege. But you, Emily, understood humility. That is why I trust you, not because of what you know, but because of who you are. Remember, money can be gained or lost, but character endures." The room went still. My father's expression cracked, something almost human flickering behind the rage. For the first time, I saw them both for what they were, men built on pride and fear, crumbling under the weight of a man's love they never truly earned. I clutched the bracelet tight. the pearls biting softly into my skin, and whispered to myself so quietly no one else could hear, "I won't let you down, Grandpa." Jason's rage erupted before Daniel could fold the letter. His chair screeched backward, the legs scraping the marble like a scream. "This is fraud," he shouted, voice breaking under the strain. "You forged this, Emily. You manipulated him when he was weak." He swept his arm across the table, crystal glasses crashing, water spreading in thin rivers across the polished surface. Aunt Margaret gasped. A cousin ducked as shards glittered under the chandelier like broken ice. "Jason, that's enough," Daniel said firmly. But Jason was beyond reason. He jabbed a trembling finger toward me. "You've ruined everything. That empire was supposed to be mine." I stood slowly, my heart pounding, every instinct screaming to retreat. But I didn't move back. I met his fury with something steadier. "It was never yours," I said, voice shaking but strong. "It was Grandpa's, and he chose me." Jason's face twisted. "You're nothing. You've done nothing. You sat in the shadows while I worked day and night for that company, and now you waltz in here and steal it all?" "I didn't steal anything," I said. "Grandpa trusted me. That's something you never earned." "Shut up!" he roared, lunging forward. The room erupted. Chairs toppled, voices screamed, and for a heartbeat, chaos filled every corner. My father grabbed Jason's arm, yanking him back just before his fury turned to violence. "Enough!" Dad barked, but his voice was no calmer than his son's. His eyes locked on me, burning with venom. "Over my dead body will you sit in Grandpa's chair. You're an embarrassment, Emily. You always have been." The words landed like they always did, but this time, instead of sinking, they struck something solid. I stood straighter. "Then you'd better get used to being embarrassed," I said, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded, "because I'm not backing down." The room froze. The air thickened. No one dared breathe. Jason's chest heaved, his face red, but behind his fury I saw it again, that flicker of fear. My father pointed at me, trembling with rage. "You're weak, soft. This family needs power, not pity. Jason has the drive, the ambition, the greed to lead." I cut him off. "He has your arrogance and your cruelty. That's why Grandpa bypassed him." Jason slammed his fist down so hard the wood cracked faintly. "Say that again." I met his glare. "Grandpa knew you only wanted control, not responsibility. And Dad, he knew you'd twist his empire the same way you twist your words. That's why he chose me." The room trembled under the weight of silence. Relatives exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered, others looked away. The chandelier above quivered like it could feel the storm below. Then Jason ripped free from my father's grasp, shaking, his voice ragged. "I'll contest this will, fraud, undue influence. I'll drag you through every courtroom in this country until you're bankrupt and disgraced." Daniel's calm cut through the storm. "You can try, Jason. But your grandfather took every precaution. Multiple witnesses, psychiatric evaluations, airtight legal review. His wishes are unshakable." Jason faltered, but only for a moment. Then his eyes locked on me again, burning hotter than before. "You'll destroy everything," he hissed. "You're not strong enough. You're not smart enough. You're nothing but a mistake." The sting of his words hit deep, but instead of shrinking, I felt my spine lengthen. I looked him in the eye. "Maybe I am a mistake to you," I said, "but to Grandpa, I was enough." A ripple passed through the room. Even those who had looked at me with doubt now seemed uncertain, the cracks forming in the Carter facade visible for the first time. My father's jaw tightened, but the certainty in his glare was fading. "We'll crush you," he whispered, low and venomous. "Mark my words, you won't last a year." I took a breath, steady and sure. "Maybe," I said softly, "maybe I'll fall. But I'll fall fighting for what Grandpa believed in, and that's something you never did. For the first time in my life, I watched my father hesitate. He didn't speak, didn't sneer, just stared. And for one fragile moment, I saw it. Fear. Not of losing money, of losing control. The conference room felt like a battlefield after the war. Glass shards glinting like fallen stars, papers soaked and curling at the edges, the air heavy with leftover rage. Jason paced near the window, his reflection fractured across the glass, a ghost of the man he thought he was. My father sat rigid at the head of the table, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Around us, relatives murmured in uneasy clusters, voices soft and broken, like the remnants of an audience unsure how to react when the play doesn't end the way they expected. But beneath it all, I felt a strange stillness. Not victory, not relief. Something deeper. Responsibility. Daniel closed the leather folder with deliberate calm. "William Carter's wishes are clear," he said, his voice steady. "Emily Carter is the majority heir. The board will convene within the month to confirm her controlling stake in Carter Global. Until then, these directives are legally binding." Every head turned toward me. Dozens of eyes pressed down, curious, skeptical, some almost fearful. My throat felt dry, but I stood, pushing the chair back quietly. "This isn't about money," I said, my voice breaking the silence. "It never was. Grandpa didn't choose me because of what I could take. He chose me because of what I could give." For a moment, no one moved. Then Aunt Margaret leaned forward, eyes shining with something close to realization. "She sounds just like William," she whispered to no one in particular. Jason spun toward her, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare compare her to him," he snapped, his voice raw. "She'll ruin us all." I turned to face him. "No, Jason, I'll give this family what you never could. Integrity." The word landed with a thud, sharp and echoing. Jason froze, his mouth parting like he couldn't quite believe I'd said it. Even my father looked away for a brief second, his mask cracking just enough for me to see the flicker of something. Doubt, or maybe guilt. He exhaled through his nose, a bitter laugh escaping. "You think this makes you powerful, Emily?" His voice was quieter now, almost tired. "Power destroys people. It destroyed me. It will destroy you." I met his eyes, the man who had spent my entire life convincing me I was small. "Maybe power destroyed you because you used it selfishly," I said. "I'll use it differently. Grandpa didn't hand me a company. He handed me a responsibility, and I won't waste it." The room shifted. One of the board members, a man with silver hair and a thoughtful expression, cleared his throat. "If William trusted her," he said slowly, "perhaps we should too." Jason turned on him instantly. "You can't be serious." His voice cracked under the weight of panic. "She doesn't know what she's doing. She'll tear everything down." But the confidence that once filled his words had drained away, replaced with something smaller, almost childlike. His golden boy composure was gone, stripped bare in front of everyone. I touched the bracelet again, the pearls warm now against my skin. Grandpa had always said grit mattered more than charm. "That's why he chose me," I whispered, "and that's why I won't let him down." Daniel met my eyes and gave the smallest nod, a quiet approval that said, "You're ready." Around us, the whispers began to fade. The room, once hostile, now looked at me differently. Not as Richard Carter's forgotten daughter, but as the heir, the leader, the one willing to fight. Jason muttered curses under his breath. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight, silence his last defense. And as I stood there, in the shadow of their disbelief, I realized I wasn't afraid of them anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the daughter who stayed quiet. I wasn't the disappointment sitting at the far end of the table. I was Emily Carter, William Carter's granddaughter, the fighter he believed in. And this empire, This impossible weight of legacy and love was now mine to protect. The conference room emptied slowly, like a theater after the curtain falls. Relatives clustered in murmuring groups, glancing at me from the corners of their eyes as though I'd become something foreign, something to fear. Some glared outright. Others looked thoughtful, almost respectful. Jason stormed out first, his footsteps sharp against the marble, his shoulders tight with fury. "You'll regret this, Emily," he hissed as he passed. But the words sounded smaller now, echoes of a boy's tantrum rather than a man's threat. My father lingered behind, his shadow stretching long under the chandelier's light. "You think you've won," he said quietly, his voice stripped of thunder, almost weary. "But you'll learn, Emily. The world doesn't care about heart or integrity. It only respects power. And when that power crushes you, don't say, 'I didn't warn you.'" I met his gaze, holding steady. "Maybe you're right," I said softly. "Maybe it will crush me, but at least I'll try to carry it with honor. That's something you forgot how to do a long time ago." For a heartbeat, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe even regret. But it vanished as quickly as it came. He turned, his voice cold again. "You'll need more than honor to survive this world." And then he left, the door closing behind him with a hollow thud that seemed to seal a chapter of my life. Silence returned. The chandelier light caught the broken glass on the table, scattering it into little constellations. My chest ached from everything unsaid, from the weight that had shifted onto my shoulders. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something steady. Resolve. Daniel approached quietly, the leather folder still in hand. "This belongs to you," he said, placing the sealed letter back into my grasp. His tone softened. "You held your ground today. William would be proud." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. "Thank you," I managed. He adjusted his glasses and gave a small, reassuring smile. "Don't thank me. Thank your grandfather. He believed in you long before anyone else did." Then he left, his footsteps fading into the hall. I stood there alone for a while, staring at the empire I'd just inherited. Carter Global, a name that once felt like a wall, now felt like a responsibility. Only an hour ago, I'd walked in as the overlooked daughter. Now I was the heir to a $7 billion legacy, standing in the ruins of a war my grandfather had already won for me with love and foresight. I touched the bracelet, sliding it higher up my wrist. The pearls were cool against my skin, the last echo of his hand when he'd said, "You're my fighter." Outside, the city gleamed beyond the tall windows, skyscrapers shimmering like watchful giants. For years, that skyline had made me feel small, like it belonged to people with sharper edges, louder voices, colder hearts. But tonight, it looked different. It looked like possibility. I thought of the employees whose lives were intertwined with Carter Global, of the families, the communities, the future that Grandpa had trusted me to protect. This wasn't just about money or proving Jason and my father wrong. It was about proving Grandpa right. I whispered into the empty room, the words trembling but certain. "I won't fail you." When I finally stepped outside, the city's night air hit me with a cool rush, clean and alive. Jason's shouts echoed faintly from somewhere below. My father's threats lingered in memory, but they no longer held power. Their empire of fear had ended the moment Grandpa's letter was read. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Richard Carter's unwanted daughter or Jason's forgotten sister. I was Emily Carter, heir to William Carter's legacy, fighter, leader. The world outside might be ruthless, but so was faith when it's built on love. And though I knew the battles ahead would test me in ways I couldn't yet imagine, I also knew one thing with absolute clarity. My story wasn't ending here. It was just beginning. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Emily's place?